instantly recognised across the galaxies, the Doctor Who theme music is almost as famous as the characters, the actors who played the Doctor, and the programme itself, instilling successive generations of Earthlings with fear after a mere burst. It has been remixed and reversioned, sampled and sent up. But where did this most iconic and idiosyncratic of theme tunes come from?
It seemed to come at the TV from 20 speakers, but of course there wasn't 20 speakers, there was a speaker about that small.
Isn't that incredible? How they managed to get that amount of sound out of that tiny speaker?
A thick sound. I could just now feel the terror threatening through my bones.
The music. Everybody remembers the music, everyone, you know, the spooky music. And the way the music would just sort of cut through the walls, you could hear it down the street, you know.
The Doctor Who theme is one of the great TV themes.
One of my earliest memories of Doctor Who is the music. It was strange, it was weird, it was perhaps the first time I'd ever heard anything like that.
It was probably the first piece of electronic music that many of us had ever heard.
And even now still has that, can still send frisson down my spine.
I think the theme used to be more scary than the actual programme. Remember the sort of time tunnel effect was very, very scary. It was something that used to sort of frighten me.
Yeah, the theme music.
What a tune though, I wonder who made it up, do you know?
Well, yes, I think it was composed by Ron Grainer.
You know, it is the man who wrote the Steptoe and Son theme.
Tales of the Unexpected, Prisoner, the Panorama theme, May Gray. There's a long list of top 60s shows that he was involved with, yeah.
They said they wanted a signature tune that sounded like a Ron Grainer signature tune.
Something which sounded a bit like Les Structures Sonores.
A French experimental sculpture group who made musical instruments out of glass tubes and sheets of metal.
And he had an idea for the melody and the kind of rhythm.
And he ripped off a piece of paper from the manuscript paper he was using, scribbled down a few notes, a few words like wind and bubbles, gave it to Delia and disappeared.
Delia Derbyshire at the BBC Radiophonic Workshop was a studio manager. She'd only been there a year. Turned down at Decca, of course, because they wouldn't employ women in their studios. Can you imagine that in 1962?
You look very nice in that dress, Victoria.
Thank you. Don't you think it's a bit...
A bit short? Oh, I shouldn't worry about that.
Shocking sexism.
So the project was given to Delia because she really was a superb talent. She was a brilliant conceptualist. She loved sound. She worked very heavily in sound. She was a wonderful musician. She was the obvious choice.
It was her mission to realise it in an electronic fashion. And turning her back on conventional instruments, she had to imagine the kinds of sounds to realise these different musical elements. And of course, in those days, there was no such thing as sequencing equipment like we have today, the wonderful world of MIDI. So she actually had to make each individual note, cutting little bits of tape together so that it rang to go ooh.
Wow, so she didn't play the keyboard at all then?
No, it wasn't played on the keyboard.
Ron came back, heard it. I said, good gracious, Delia, did I write that? And Delia said, well, most of it, Ron, yes. And he said, it's wonderful, you deserve all the royalties, or at least half of them. But unfortunately, they weren't allowed to do that in those days, so Delia never got any royalties.
And it wasn't till 10 years later, in 1973, when that recording was remastered for a single release, that there was any thought of giving Delia credit.
You listen to it now and you still hear it with fresh ears. It's almost impossible to work out how it was done unless you look at the tapes and you can see all the edits. It sort of sounds grown rather than performed. And there are a lot of bands like the KLF and Orbital. The Orb, the very band name, actually comes from a track on a BBC Radiophonic Workshop album. It's a sound effect from a Blake Seven episode.
I found that rather insulting.
As I understand it, Blur realised a Delia Derbyshire composition, and you know, that's gone off in the Mars Interplanetary Lander. It'll get there on Christmas Day this year.
Travellers claim to have seen it throughout the centuries, but there's never been any proof.
Like the Loch Ness Monster.
Loch.
Oh.